The Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Catherine, made the move with George, Charlotte and Louis during a school break, reports say.
The British royal family has always been a fortress of secrets, a gilded institution where whispers travel faster than headlines and dignity is worn like armor. But in early November, behind the immaculate walls of Buckingham Palace, something happened that shattered the silence in a way no palace statement could contain. 3 tiaras, gone. Without permission, without warning, without a single word of apology. And when Prince William found out what had been done to his wife, the woman he had sworn to protect, the future Queen of England, the calm, composed facade that the palace had spent years carefully constructing cracked. Stay with me, because what unfolded over these extraordinary days is one of the most jaw-dropping episodes in recent royal history. We're talking about a confrontation in a palace corridor, a vault accessed without consent, a royal tiara secretly intended for a non-royal, and a moment inside King Charles's private chambers that left everyone in the palace completely breathless. And here's the question I want you to keep in mind as we go through this. Do you think Camilla went too far? Or was she simply exercising the authority her title gives her? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, because by the end of this video, your answer might surprise you. The storm brewing. To understand how everything unraveled, we have to go back to late October. Buckingham Palace was buzzing, and not in the elegant, choreographed way it usually does. There were 2 major royal engagements bearing down on the calendar like freight trains, and every single department inside the palace was under immense pressure. First, on November 12th, Queen Consort Camilla was set to host a prestigious reception for the Booker Prize finalists, one of the literary world's most celebrated events. This wasn't a casual gathering. This was a global spotlight moment, televised, photographed, and dissected by royal watchers from London to Los Angeles. Then, just 2 days later, on November 14th, King Charles III was scheduled to travel to South Wales to celebrate his official birthday, another deeply symbolic event in the royal calendar, rich with ceremony and watched by millions. 2 events, 4 days apart, and the pressure inside the palace, suffocating. From the beginning, Camilla was hands-on, some might say relentlessly so. According to palace insiders, she personally supervised multiple departments: royal protocol, guest coordination, decor, lighting, and wardrobe. She approved the import of rare floral arrangements flown in from overseas. She ordered bespoke fabrics from Italy to elevate the palace interiors. For Camilla, these events weren't simply ceremonial obligations. They were statements of power, refinement, and authority. And by early November, on the surface, everything looked perfect. Guest lists had been finalized. Rehearsals were done. Security had been tightened. Staff believed the palace was ready, but behind those gilded doors, something quietly dangerous had begun to take shape. The issue was the tiara. Now, before we go any further, I want you to understand something crucial, because this is where so many people misread royal events. In the world of the monarchy, tiaras are not jewelry. They are not accessories. They are not fashion choices. They are symbols. Each one carries history, legacy, and rank. Each one tells a story about who you are, where you stand, and what you represent within the institution. Choosing the wrong tiara, or wearing none at all, sends a message just as powerful as any speech. So when Camilla sat down for her final wardrobe fittings and realized that none of her usual tiaras worked, some clashing with her planned blue gown for the Booker reception, others too heavy, too outdated, or simply unavailable due to maintenance, the frustration wasn't cosmetic. It was institutional. And that's when her eyes turned towards someone else's collection. The corridor. The first confrontation. On the evening of November 4th, after a long and exhausting day of preparations, Camilla reportedly approached Catherine in a quiet palace corridor. Let that image settle for a moment. 2 of the most powerful women in the British monarchy, alone in a hallway, the weight of centuries of protocol hovering between them. Camilla's tone was calm, but it was the kind of calm that carries a current underneath it. "I hear you have the Oriental circlet available," she said. "It would be ideal for the upcoming events." Catherine, always composed, always gracious, was caught off guard, but she didn't crumble. She paused before responding with careful, measured words. "I'm afraid I was planning to wear it myself," she said. "I have engagements coming up, and my outfits were chosen to match that tiara." A reasonable answer. A respectful one. The kind of response you'd expect from someone who has spent years studying the fine art of royal diplomacy. But Camilla's expression reportedly hardened. "You have plenty of jewelry," she snapped. "You don't need that one right now." Catherine held her ground. "It was assigned to me, and I had already planned my wardrobe around it." And this is where the conversation took a turn that no one in the palace could have anticipated. "Why are you always trying to take attention?" Camilla said sharply. "Don't forget who I am. I am the queen. When I need something for the good of the crown, I expect cooperation." Think about those words for a second. Don't forget who I am. This wasn't a request anymore. This was a declaration of hierarchy, a reminder of rank. Catherine looked taken aback, but she didn't flinch. "This isn't about attention," she replied quietly. "It's about preparation and respect." Camilla stepped closer. "You should know your place," she said coldly. "Everything here exists because of the crown, and I decide what is needed." There was a brief, charged silence. Then Catherine straightened, shoulders back, chin up, voice soft but unwavering. "I'll make arrangements," she said, and she turned and walked away. Here's what I want you to notice. Catherine didn't shout. She didn't argue. She didn't demand. She used the most powerful tool in the royal arsenal, dignity. And yet, even as she walked away with grace, something in that corridor had fundamentally shifted. A line had been crossed, and both women knew it. But here's what Catherine didn't know yet. The conversation in the corridor was only the beginning. The vault, a brazen act of power. By the following morning, whispers had already begun threading through the palace like smoke. Staff exchanged quiet glances. Voices dropped. Everyone sensed that something had happened, but no one had the full picture. That illusion of normalcy shattered just before midday. Camilla's personal security officer arrived at the royal jewelry vault, alongside her senior designer and 2 palace officials. The visit was completely unscheduled. No notification, no prior arrangement, no consultation. The officer guarding the vault stepped forward, immediately alert. "May I ask who sent you?" he said firmly. "These items are logged under the Princess of Wales." Camilla's designer didn't hesitate. "We are here on the Queen Consort's instruction. The tiaras are needed for upcoming events." The guard frowned. "Is Catherine aware of this? Protocol requires her approval." There was a pause. Then the response came. Cold, deliberate, and unmistakably calculated. "Catherine is not the queen." Let that land. Catherine is not the queen. It wasn't just an answer. It was a statement designed to shut down any further resistance. And it worked. With visible discomfort, the guard signaled for the vault to be opened. What happened next left the palace reeling. The first tiara removed was the oriental circlet, the very piece at the center of the corridor conversation just hours before. But the removal didn't stop there. 2 more of Catherine's tiaras were taken. The Cambridge lover's knot, famously worn by Princess Diana. One of the most emotionally charged pieces in the entire royal collection, now so strongly associated with Catherine that many consider it her signature tiara. And the lotus flower tiara, a lighter, elegant piece that Catherine had worn at multiple formal occasions throughout her life as Princess of Wales. 3 tiaras, all removed without Catherine's knowledge, all logged under Camilla's authority, all sent for fitting and styling. By the time senior aides learned what had happened, the mood inside the palace had changed. This wasn't a simple borrowing. This wasn't a practical solution to a wardrobe problem. To many who witnessed it, this felt deliberate, targeted, a message dressed up as necessity. And now, let me ask you this. If you were in Catherine's position, if someone walked into your office, took 3 of your most prized possessions without asking, and justified it with, "I outrank you," how would you feel? Tell me in the comments, because Catherine's reaction is going to surprise you. The revelation, a secret that changed everything. The news reached Catherine at exactly 4:30 in the afternoon. She was in her private sitting room when Mr. John Harrington, the long-serving head of the Royal Jewelry Vault, was quietly shown in. His face was tense. His posture was stiff. The moment Catherine saw him, she knew. He explained everything. The unscheduled visit, the instructions issued in Camilla's name, the removal of not one, but 3 tiaras, all without a single word to Catherine. As he spoke, Catherine's face tightened, her hands clenched in her lap. "She took them?" Catherine said, her voice low and controlled. "Without my consent?" "Yes," Mr. Harrington replied. "I raised concerns. I asked whether you had approved it." For a brief moment, anger flashed across Catherine's face, raw and unmistakable. But years of royal training, years of discipline and grace under fire, took over almost instantly. She straightened. She breathed. She nodded. "Thank you for telling me," she said calmly. "You did the right thing." After he left, Catherine sat alone. The anger was there, but beneath it was something deeper, disbelief. An hour later, she went to Camilla's office. The Queen Consort was surrounded by her dresser, her designer, 2 senior aides. The room fell completely silent the moment Catherine walked in. "May I speak with you?" Catherine asked, her tone firm but controlled. Camilla looked up, irritated. "Say it here," she replied. "I have nothing to hide." What followed was a confrontation witnessed by staff. Catherine asked why her tiaras had been taken without permission. Camilla responded by questioning whether Catherine was behaving as though she were already queen. Catherine spoke of protocol and respect. Camilla laughed, not warmly, but sharply, and said, "Respect? You seem to forget who wears the crown now. I am the queen. I don't ask. I decide." "This isn't about power," Catherine replied. "It's about boundaries." Camilla leaned back. "You're mistaken. It's always about power." Catherine stood in front of a room full of staff, her dignity publicly challenged, her authority openly dismissed. Still, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't crumble. "You took 3 tiaras," she said slowly. "Not one. That was unnecessary." Camilla's eyes narrowed. "I took them because I could." Catherine inhaled. Then quietly, with more restraint than most people could ever muster, she delivered her final words. "Then understand this. This will not be forgotten." She turned and walked out, calm on the surface, trembling beneath it. But even that wasn't the worst of it. That evening, a discreet knock sounded at Catherine's door. It was Lady Eleanor Whitmore, a senior palace aide known for her loyalty to protocol. She'd received information from a member of the wardrobe team. The lotus flower tiara, one of the 3 taken from the vault, wasn't being prepared for royal duty at all. It was being dressed for Camilla's granddaughter, a private appearance, no official event, no royal function, no connection to the crown whatsoever. Catherine sat completely still as the words landed. A royal tiara, with all the history, symbolism, and institutional weight it carried, was being borrowed for personal family use, for a non-working royal, not for the crown, not for duty, for a private moment of glamour. "This wasn't about necessity," Catherine said softly. "It was a message, and that message cut deeper than anything that had happened in the corridor. William comes home. The moment everything changed." William returned on the morning of November 7th. The children ran to him the moment they saw him. George clung to his leg. Charlotte laughed. Louis jumped into his arms. For one brief, beautiful moment, Catherine allowed herself to smile. A real one. Small and fleeting, but real. But the smile didn't last. That evening, after dinner had ended and the children were safely in bed, the palace fell quiet. William and Catherine retreated to their private quarters. He closed the door behind them and turned to face her. He didn't need her to say a word. One look was enough. Her shoulders were tense. Her eyes carried a tiredness that sleep couldn't fix. The calm mask she wore so well throughout her public life had begun, for the first time, to crack. "You don't look all right," he said gently. "What's wrong?" Catherine opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her throat tightened. She shook her head slightly, the instinct to protect him, to smooth things over, rising up automatically. But William stepped closer. "No," he said. "Something's happened." She exhaled slowly and moved to the sofa, sitting down with care, folding her hands tightly in her lap. For a long moment she stared at the floor, gathering herself. And then, finally, she spoke. "While you were away," she said quietly, "something went very wrong." And then she told him everything. She spoke slowly at first, describing Camilla's demand in the corridor, how sudden it was, how little room there had been to respond. She described the tone of the conversation, the way certain words had made her feel small, unseen, dismissed. Then she told him about the vault, how the tiaras had been taken without her consent. Not one, three. She told him about the confrontation in Camilla's office, about standing in front of staff while her authority was reduced to nothing. And then she reached the final detail. The lotus flower tiara, she said, and her voice broke. It wasn't taken for royal duty. It was for personal use, for someone outside the royal role. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. She had held them in for too long. William did not interrupt. He did not look away. He listened with every part of himself. Still, focused, completely present. His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. When she finished, the silence between them was almost unbearable. "That is unacceptable," he said at last. His voice was low, controlled, but beneath it was something unmistakable. Fury. The quiet kind. The kind that burns steady and long. "You should never have been treated like that." Catherine shook her head slowly.
Before I begin, I know that you'd all want to join me in sending our thoughts and prayers.
"It wasn't just about authority," she said. "It was about erasing me." William looked at her carefully. "Explain." She took a breath, and then she told him something she had perhaps never fully articulated before. The story of what those tiaras truly meant to her. The Oriental circlet, she said, was one of the first tiaras she had been trusted with after becoming Princess of Wales. It had been worn by Queen Alexandra during times when restraint mattered more than display. When she wore it, she felt grounded, balanced. It reminded her that leadership doesn't need to shout to be powerful. The lover's knot carried a different kind of weight. It was Diana's. When people saw it on her, they didn't just see a tiara. They saw a woman, a mother, a princess who never got to finish the role she had begun. Catherine had never worn it lightly. She wore it when she felt strong enough to carry that memory, when she wanted to honor what Diana had started. William's jaw tightened. For a moment, emotion crossed his face, raw and unguarded. "And then the lotus flower," Catherine whispered. "That one symbolized change, renewal, grace under pressure." She had worn it during the years when everything felt overwhelming, when she was still finding her footing, when she needed a reminder that growth is painful but necessary. She looked up at William, tears shining in her eyes. "That tiara helped me remember who I am," she said, "and it was taken not for duty, not for the crown, but to make a point." The room was silent. William reached out and took her hands in his. "They weren't just jewels," Catherine whispered. "They were pieces of my journey." William was quiet for a long moment. Then his voice came, steady, resolute, final. "This will not end like this." "I don't want conflict," Catherine said. "I just want dignity." "You deserve dignity," William replied, "and respect, and you will have both." She leaned into him then. He held her close, protective, steady, present. "I should have been here," he said softly. "You're here now," she whispered. For the first time in days, Catherine felt safe, but as he held her, William's eyes stayed open, distant, focused, because he had already decided this was not over. William acts. The morning, everything shifted. By 6:54 the following morning, William was already awake. He hadn't slept deeply. The kind of sleep he'd managed had been restless, shallow, punctuated by the weight of everything Catherine had told him, the words replaying on a quiet loop he couldn't silence. The corridor, the vault, the confrontation in front of staff, the lotus flower tiara, a non-royal, personal use, to make a point. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling in the early gray light. In his years as a royal, William had developed a well-earned reputation for patience, for careful, considered diplomacy, for choosing the long road when the short one might cause damage. He had learned, sometimes painfully, that inside the monarchy, the way you raise a concern can matter just as much as the concern itself. But this was different. This wasn't a policy disagreement or a question of protocol that could be smoothed over with a quiet word and a polite smile. This was his wife. 3 tiaras stripped from a vault without consent. Dignity, hers, publicly dismantled by someone who had looked her in the eye and said, "I took them because I could." When his eyes opened that morning, his mind was already clear, decided. Some things simply could not wait. Catherine stirred beside him. Before she could speak, William's voice broke the quiet. "We're going to act immediately," he said. "Today." Catherine sat up slowly. "Act?" she asked, blinking. "William, it's barely morning." He turned to face her. "I know. Going to act? Where? And how?" His answer was simple. 4 words. "With my father. Today." That woke her fully. For a long moment, Catherine was completely still. She looked down at the bed covers, then back at him.
And the work of the Centre for Early Childhood stems from one essential truth.
A dozen questions hovered on the tip of her tongue. Was this the right time? Would it make things worse? What would this mean for the weeks ahead? But she had spent days choosing restraint. She had walked out of Camilla's office without raising her voice. She had told the children she was simply tired. She had chosen again and again the dignified path. But she had also whispered something to herself in the quiet of her sitting room that she hadn't shared with anyone. Dignity did not mean silence. She would not undo that now. "All right," she said quietly. They got out of bed together. The morning light was thin and pale, the palace grounds just visible through the curtains. Still, indifferent, beautiful. It struck Catherine, as it sometimes did, how easily pain could hide behind beautiful walls. She dressed carefully, clothes that felt like armor, simple lines, structured cut, colors that communicated confidence without demanding attention. William dressed the same way. Neither spoke much, but their movements were synchronized, purposeful, the rhythm of 2 people who know they are strongest when they simply move forward, side by side. As she fastened her bracelet, Catherine said quietly, "I don't want this to become a battle." William stepped behind her. "It won't, but it will be clear." At 9 a.m., they were ready. They walked side by side through the palace corridors, and the palace noticed. A few staff members glanced away quickly. Others stood a little straighter. Something about the way they moved together, the precision, the intention, the quiet gravity, communicated everything without a single word.
They always ask actually unusual questions often.
At King Charles's secretary's desk, the woman looked up and froze. "Your Royal Highness, I wasn't expecting you." "We need to see the king," William said, polite but immovable. "You're not on today's schedule." "I know, we'll wait." They were shown to a sitting area outside the king's study. Catherine sat with her hands folded. The minutes passed slowly. She thought of those tiaras, not as objects or symbols of rank, but as pieces of a story she had spent years quietly writing. 3 chapters, all taken in a single morning without a word. She was not here for revenge. She was here because boundaries matter, because an institution built on protocol cannot selectively apply that protocol. She was here because dignity did not mean silence. And she was here because William was beside her. Then, footsteps. King Charles appeared, a folder under his arm, and stopped the moment he saw them. "William." His eyes moved immediately. "Catherine." "Good morning, Father. We needed to speak with you." Charles studied their faces, the stillness, the quiet resolve sitting just beneath the surface. He had spent decades reading rooms. He could see in a single look that this was not a social call. "All right," he said. "Come in." The reckoning. Inside King Charles's study. The door to King Charles's private study closed behind them, shutting out the rest of the palace. Charles set his folder aside and gestured for them to sit. "What's going on?" William waited until Catherine was seated. Then he spoke. "This concerns a serious breach of protocol," he said calmly. Charles frowned. "Go on." Catherine inhaled slowly. Her voice was steady, though it cost her something to make it so. "Yesterday," she began, 3 tiaras under my care were removed from the vault without my knowledge or permission." Charles turned sharply toward her. "Without your permission?" "Yes, sir, including the Oriental circlet, the Cambridge lover's knot, and the lotus flower tiara." Charles's expression tightened. "Who authorized this?" William's answer was quiet, direct, unambiguous. "Camilla." The word settled into the room like a stone into still water. Charles was silent for a moment. Then, "I assume there's more." Catherine nodded. She described the conversation in the corridor, the request, her reasonable response, and the decision, made without consultation, without consent, to take all 3 tiaras the following morning. She described being confronted in front of staff, having her authority publicly diminished, her dignity openly challenged. "And there is one more thing," she said quietly. Charles looked at her carefully. "Go on." "The lotus flower tiara," she said, choosing each word with precision, "was not taken for royal duty." A pause. Then Charles's brow furrowed deeply. "What do you mean?" "I was informed," Catherine said, that it was intended for personal use by a non-royal family member. The silence that followed was the heaviest of the entire meeting.
So whatever faith you have, or whether you have none, it is in this life-giving light.
Charles exhaled slowly, deliberately. That is highly inappropriate. William's voice remained controlled, but there was iron beneath it. This wasn't only about jewels, it was about authority being used to humiliate. Catherine lowered her gaze briefly, then looked back up. "I have always respected the hierarchy," she said. "I have never overstepped, but this crossed a line." Charles rubbed his temple, processing. Then he straightened in his chair. "I understand your concerns," he said, "and I agree. This matter should have been handled entirely differently." He looked at Catherine directly. "You should not have been placed in this position." She inclined her head. "Thank you, sir." Charles stood. "I will look into this," he said, "personally." William nodded. "That's all we're asking." And then, just as William and Catherine rose to leave, just as the meeting seemed to be drawing to a close, Charles paused. "Wait," he said. They stopped. Charles stood still for a moment, something turning over quietly in his mind. Then he looked up. "Come back," he said. They returned to their seats. Charles reached for the phone on his desk and pressed a single button. "Yes," he said. "Please ask the Queen Consort to come to my study immediately." He set the phone down, leaned back. The room grew heavier. Neither William nor Catherine spoke. They simply waited. A few minutes later, the door opened. Camilla entered, composed, confident, wearing the expression of someone who had nothing to fear. She smiled briefly when she saw Charles. Then she saw William and Catherine still seated, and the smile faded. "Charles," she said, careful now, "you wanted to see me?" "Yes," the king replied. "Please sit." She sat, crossed her hands in her lap.
It was all very sort of laid back and happy, and we used to go off.
Her voice was measured when she spoke. "What is this about?" Charles looked directly at her. "I've just been informed about the removal of several tiaras from the vault, including pieces under Catherine's care." Camilla's expression hardened by a fraction. "I was acting in service of the crown," she replied. "Those jewels belong to the institution, not to any one person." William shifted in his seat, but stayed silent. Camilla continued. "There were important events. Decisions needed to be made quickly. I acted as Queen Consort." Charles raised his hand, a small gesture, but final. "Acting for the crown does not mean bypassing protocol." Camilla tilted her head. "Protocol must sometimes bend," she replied, "especially when others forget their place." The words landed like a match on dry wood. Charles's voice, when it came, was unmistakably firm. "That is not how this family, or this crown, functions." Camilla opened her mouth. Charles spoke again before she could. "This matter is a dent to the image of the royal family," he said. "It is an insult to Catherine. It should never have happened." Camilla stiffened. "With immediate effect," Charles continued, his voice leaving no room for debate, "all 3 tiaras will be returned to the vault. There will be no exceptions." He paused. Then he delivered words that no one in the room had expected to hear. "You will not wear a tiara at the Booker Prize reception," he said. "And you will not wear one during my birthday events either." The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time since she had walked into the room, Camilla's confidence visibly faltered. She opened her mouth, then stopped. A moment passed. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Very well," she said quietly, "if that is your decision."
I don't want to be scared too much, but it's that sort of frisson, isn't it? I'm just being a little bit frightened.
"It is," Charles replied. He turned to Catherine. His expression softened. "I'm sorry you were placed in this position," he said. "It should not have reached this point." Catherine held her composure beautifully. "Thank you, sir," she said. William added simply, "We appreciate you addressing it." Charles nodded. This ends here. The aftermath, what the world saw without knowing why. Within hours, palace staff confirmed that all 3 tiaras, the Oriental Circlet, the Cambridge Lover's Knot, and the Lotus Flower Tiara, had been returned to the vault by midday. The matter was handled quietly, efficiently, and without a single official statement. But here's where it gets fascinating, because what the world saw next told the story without telling the story. When the Booker Prize reception took place days later, viewers and photographers noticed something unusual. Camilla appeared without a tiara. Instead, she wore an elegant sapphire necklace and matching earrings. It looked, to the untrained eye, like a deliberate modern-style choice. Royal commentators speculated enthusiastically, some suggesting she was embracing a contemporary approach, others hinting at personal preference. None mentioned the real reason. The same absence repeated itself during the king's birthday events. Again, no tiara. Again, quiet speculation. Again, not a single official explanation. Inside the palace walls, however, the truth was known by everyone who mattered. And then came the moment that crystallized everything. Weeks later, at a formal state banquet, Catherine stepped into the room wearing the Oriental circlet tiara. It rested lightly on her head, delicate, refined, commanding. Photographs spread immediately. Commentators praised its elegance. The public responded with warmth and admiration. But Catherine didn't wear it for beauty. She wore it as a reminder of boundaries, of dignity, of what it truly means to stand firm without raising your voice, of what it means to hold your position with grace when every instinct is telling you to fight. And as she moved through that room, calm, composed, completely unshaken, those who knew the full weight of what had happened understood something that would never make it into any official caption or palace press release. Some crowns are not seized. They are not demanded or taken by force of rank. They are not worn as a display of power over someone else. Some crowns are earned, quietly, steadily, with dignity. Outro! So here we are. The dust has settled, officially. The tiaras are back in the vault. The events went ahead. The photos were taken. The public saw exactly what the palace intended them to see. But you now know what happened behind those walls. You know about the corridor. You know about the vault. You know about the lotus flower tiara and the secret that made a difficult situation something far more personal. You know about a wife's tears and a husband's fury, and a king who, faced with a reckoning inside his own family, chose to act. And so I have to ask you, and I genuinely want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think William did the right thing by taking this directly to King Charles? Or should he have handled it differently? And what about Camilla? Was this a calculated move, or was she simply exercising authority she genuinely believed she had? And perhaps most importantly, if you were Catherine, would you have stayed as composed as she did? Because here's what strikes me most about this entire story. Throughout every stage of it, the corridor, the vault, the confrontation, the tears, the meeting with the king, Catherine never lost herself. She was hurt. She was angry. She was publicly humiliated. And yet she never stopped being exactly who she is. That, in the end, might be the most powerful statement of all. If this video gave you something to think about, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who care about the real stories behind the royal headlines. Subscribe so you never miss a royal update. And if you have strong thoughts about today's story, the comments are open and I read every single one. One last thing. The video on your screen right now covers the next chapter of this story. Because believe me, what followed these events sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace in ways no one could have predicted. Don't miss it.